My guest is here, and I really want to have a conversation with him on this. I am fascinated by what is taking place. We are joined with Arnaud Develay. Arnaud, man, welcome to the show. How you doing today? You doing okay?
Hello, Jamal. I'm fine. How are you?
I'm doing well. I am intrigued by the news that is coming out. And let me give you your byline. Arnaud Develay. He is an author, political analyst, international lawyer specializing in international criminal law. His latest book, Foreign Entanglements, Biden, Ukraine, and the Fracturing of the American Political Consensus. I've given somewhat of a context to the audience already, so I don't need to retread. Donald Trump is bashing the hell out of Zelensky. I mean, battering him. He came out with this tweet recently. I showed the audience already. I will present it to you just so it's in the video when I cut this, where he is effectively saying, look, you're boasting on the pages of the Wall Street Journal. You have no cards in this. You didn't fire a shot to defend Crimea, and now you're taking this umbrage with this issue. And he even points out, you're going to lose your entire country in 3 years if you keep this up. Now, I think 3 years is a little bit inflated, but okay, whatever. You're going to lose your entire country if you keep this up. How are you really acting like this with the deal? Now, the entire White House is doing this. Rubio has been out also on this front, bashing him. The press secretary has been out bashing Zelensky. And what I find interesting is this is not really aimed at Russia. Give me your take on this. I mean, Moscow has put out conditions that are red lines in the way that they've described it. Make sure I'm straight. Yeah, have put out what they consider to be red lines. The four territories plus Crimea are part of the Russian Federation. That is not going to change. We don't care what happens. That is not going to change. No NATO, and to be able to enshrine that in some kind of reality where they can believe it. Trump is not there. But they're still putting out this as if it's an ultimatum. And like I said, going after Zelensky on this. Give me a take on this. I mean, is Russia willing to budge on those red lines? Do they know something in the Trump administration that I don't?
No, you summed it up pretty well. Russia's red lines have been known for a long time, and they've remained unchanged. As you mentioned, the four new oblasts from formerly known as East Ukraine, plus Crimea, which has voted to rejoin Russia over a decade ago, which, as you mentioned, makes no sense for Zelensky to now raise as a sticking issue bearing on any kind of peace talks. No, what I think is going on, and it's a recurring theme, is someone who basically wants the gravy train to continue. That's as far as he's personally concerned. That he knows that the curtain is coming down very soon, and he wants to somehow extend his shelf life. The other thing is that the Europeans need to maintain the illusion of a Russian boogeyman for reasons that are completely wholly unrelated to the conflict per se, but more bearing on trying to salvage this political project called the European Union, and as such, basically provide their paymaster with the savings of all the people living therein. There's also an interesting statement made by former Russian Defense Minister Shoigu, bearing on who's not, somebody off the street, as you might imagine, who basically said that in as far as the West is concerned, and more specifically, he pointed out to the European Union, they are looking to engage in a frontal conflict with Russia, according to him, within the next 3 to 5 years. So it's actually all coherent. If we were to have something, let's say, even something akin to Minsk 3, this would deflate the drive for Europe, which is aimed at, so some would say, picking the pockets of their citizens. Others would say, to retool the military capability of the Union. But in any event, to the extent there are globalists still acting behind the scene, and that Brussels for a lack of a better place, is now de facto by default their headquarters, it makes perfect sense. You know, Russia, as on an ideological point of view, as far as the globalists are concerned, is the boogeyman. I mean, it represents everything that they want to eradicate: traditional value, large families, verticality of the state, self-awareness of one's own cultural, religious roots, and it happens to also, for lack of a better word, occupy, quote unquote, 1/6 of the world landmass with everything in terms of natural resources that's in it, and that those globalists are dying to get their hands on, their grubby hands on. So I think you have to take into account this whole panopticon to try to somehow begin to understand why Zelensky feels confident enough that he can defy the Trump administration. Because obviously, if we're just looking at this, in the wake of what happened last February in the Oval Office, it makes no sense for him now to come up with yet another impediment to what makes perfect sense if you are really honest and real as far as stopping the violence and putting an end to a conflict which militarily is lost. He himself acknowledged that much last week. He was giving
Right.
an interview when he said, we ain't got what it takes to reclaim those territories. So why are we still fighting? And why are you still violating every moratorium and or ceasefire whenever those come to be?
It's I
It's
take.
an extension.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's an
No, I'm
extension,
sorry. Please.
he's trying to basically play increments per increments, 3 months at a time, the required time, hoping again that, as far as the economic front is concerned, for the Trump administration, things will get so bad that the midterm elections in 2026 will basically turn the tendency around. That's the calculus. You have to put ourselves in the head of the simpletons that are placed in the European Union key positions, in as far as their view of the world, their political incompetence, their illegitimacy because none of those people were elected, and their propensity to think as the former Soviet Politburo used to think like, which is, when something doesn't work, you want to get more of it.
Yeah.
Those people are incapable of looking at themselves in the mirror and act, with introspection. In other words, their line is the line. That's it. And if it hasn't worked up to that point, it's because we haven't done enough of it. That's my understanding of the whole thing. So something's got to give at some point. Now it's interesting to note that Russia said, "Well, we're not basically calling for the Zelensky regime to be gone."
I
Well, I
saw
mean,
that.
come on, you know very well that there's no way you can sign any kind of memorandum of understanding, not to speak of a full-fledged peace treaty, with as long as you got this person who's legally illegitimate in place. So I didn't quite understand why Peskov said that in his own interview. But save for that, again, Russia's positions are known. They've been really clear, and they haven't deviated an iota. They were even, to the extent there might have been some wriggling room, there was talk about freeze, and that's when Witkoff met with Putin last time in St. Petersburg. They discussed the possibility to be discussed of freezing the conflict at the current situation. But I guess this would be, as far as the Russian Federation is willing to go. And I doubt personally that it would politically be viable in as far as Russian public opinion is concerned. But
Mhm.
those might be just elements of language to try to provide a dynamic leading to an appeasement, leading to winding down the rhetoric and making it possible for people to start sitting around a table and talk. That's
Right.
really where we are right now, which is basically, we haven't moved much. To the extent there might have been discussions going back and forth, to the extent the Trump administration owing to Witkoff being somewhat someone who understands things outside of the ideological bent of the Beltway.
Mhm.
He was able to faithfully bring back to Trump, what the Russian position is about. But that's about it right now.
I need to see what Trump comes up with. Now, I will tell you, if I'm a sociopath, I had a conversation with Brian Berletic. He's from the New Atlas, fantastic show, and Brian pointed out that effectively all of this is playbook, like all of this is war planning. That the U.S. ultimately wants to deal with China, and they want Europe to basically feed the Europeans to the Russians in order to damage both with the idea of maintaining a certain amount of primacy around the globe. And you can kind of see it, right? Like, for example, this is Hegseth. Hegseth gave the speech, I think this was last year, but this is recently where he's talking to Europe directly. I don't think he's in Europe, but he's talking
Be true.
effectively to Europe about NATO, saying, we want to maintain NATO. We just don't want to be part of it. We want you to do this. And as you pointed out, Shoigu is saying Europe is preparing for war in 3 to 5 years. It looks like they are. The jingoistic rhetoric, the things that they're saying, the things, we need to increase our war production. We need to do all of this stuff. Effectively, the Russians scared the hell out of them by beating the hell out of Ukraine. Listen to what he says.
America first doesn't mean America alone. It means we expect our allies to step up, to be true force multipliers for freedom. This approach ensures we achieve peace through strength. The time of the United States, here in Pennsylvania, here in our country, being the sole guarantor of European security has passed. It's long overdue. Europe has to step up military and lead.
This is, effectively, we're not getting rid of NATO. We want you to do NATO. We want you to build up your militaries. We want you to do all of this stuff. What do you think about that? I heard the speech by Putin. Well, it wasn't a speech. He was talking to, I guess, war planners, and he was pointing out they're looking at what we're doing. We're a step ahead of what they are. Effectively, we freaked them out, and we need to understand what's going to be the battle plan of the future. I would imagine Putin knows that Europe is gearing up for war. What do you think about that? That thought that the U.S. is not exactly pulling out; they're more so pushing Europe into a larger conflict with Russia.
Well, of course, it's a possibility. And again, if you take into account Shoigu's statement on this overall issue, it would make sense that they would somehow assign tasks within NATO. Europe would be entrusted to somehow, if not conquer Russia and dismantle it, which is again ultimately what the game plan is about, at least contain it to the extent there's anything to contain, which is again, it's a nonsensical issue. Russia has no. This is not the Soviet Union. They have no plans on ideologically subverting anybody. They are content within their natural historical space. So as a result, to the extent they are now more confident, I think, that they've ever been, arguably, in their entire history. I'm talking about Russia. Whereas Europe is under this current construct, which does not reflect its organic history
or reality,
and our reality, and the diversity of its cultures and contribution to world civilization. We have a European Union which is somehow, we've talked about the reversal of poles. Everything that was up is now down, and vice versa. I think short term, there's also the idea that to the extent Europe is expected to step it up and upgrade, they're going to do it with what, by and large, with American equipment. So we could look at it also first and foremost as an attempt to satisfy the U.S. military industrial complex, because all those weapon systems have to be compatible within NATO. You cannot, as we've seen with When Turkey attempted and did acquire those S-400, Washington was extremely annoyed. Not that much because of the acquisition of the system, but because it makes no sense within pre-existing weapon systems as they are interacting with each other and can be somehow put together to produce a synergy, right, on the battlefield. But so yeah, so and the idea is, yeah, and we've seen it. We've seen that, for instance, when Poland, they contribute, let's say, a quarter of what they get back from Brussels in terms of European funding, and we don't hear about putting together a European weapon or defense manufacturing sector. It's not about sovereignty. So that makes kind of no sense, because it contradicts, in a way, what J.D. Vance said in Munich last time, when he said you just have to focus on yourself and you have to regain your sovereignty, and you have to instead of engaging into ideology and creating monsters, foreign monsters, as Washington was fond of saying, to go outside looking for monsters to destroy, right? But in reality, you are imposing onto Europe, and or should I say, you are depriving Europe of its own tools required to satisfy this thirst for power projection. Otherwise, I mean, if you have to, basically rely on spare parts or a weapon system per se from the US to operate and defend, what you're supposed to be all about, then what is this, speech, this kind of retooling, this reset of what Europe should be doing in those far as expressing or reflecting or implementing its own citizens' needs? And I'm not even going to talk about the fact that Europe right now is a desindustrialized husk. It does not have any need to create military sectors of any kind. It needs to start investing massively in R&D and create the jobs of tomorrow, and
Right.
start trying to catch up with the gap, that the ever widening gap between it and digital high tech superpowers like China.
Yeah.
That makes more sense.
Agreed.
So we have to be very cautious about, also this kind of like, yeah, MAGA is back, and that's going to somehow influence Europe in a beneficial way. You have to parse through the discourse and look how it computes on the ground. And to me, it doesn't connect at all.
Yeah.
This also could be a way for the Trump administration to handle semantics so as to lure their own ideological enemies in the US, now in Brussels, i.e. the globalist, in telling them, making them believe that somehow we are still on the, with you on the program, that at some point down the road, China and Russia have to be dealt with. But at this point, I think it's difficult to say. I think it's speculative, but since right now we're in a transition period, not only within the Euro-Atlantic relation, but also at the global level, with
Mhm.
transfers of the center of gravity of what the German used to call the Weltanschauung, the spirit of the world. It's literally moving, as we speak. We can witness it day by day now. The short-lived tariff war exposed how much, a lot of water has gone under the bridge since the the emergence of the unipolar moment. And
Mhm.
it's a lot of things could happen either way, predicated on so many micro events, regional events, uh, personality based events, political personnel in some key countries. And it's so, everything is really at this point so unstable, so chaotic, but this again, if anything, illustrates, reflects on the emergence of a new distribution of power. And this is basically what we should try to extract out of all those events. There is definitely a redistribution of powers, and as in any redistribution of powers, we're going to have winners and losers. And right now, there's a lot of psyops, a lot of semantics being used left and right that seem to be evolving depending from on one file to the next file, sometimes within days, coming from even areas where we would expect an ideological cohesion. So
Yeah.
it's this is where we are right now. It's a fascinating time in the sense that we know that there's this elephant in the room, that the industrial output, the demographics, the natural resources are definitely now identified as within this emerging construct called BRICS, which no fault of itself is not trying to impose itself, but is acting as a reaction of abuses for the last 30 years. And even though it's somewhat surmises to the West in general and to the United States in particular, you could be part of the BRICS if you wanted to. We are open to anybody. And
Yeah.
no, we don't want to get rid of the dollar. It's never been our intention to do so. But you've been sanctioning us using the dollar as a weapon for as far as the eye can see. So
Yeah.
what are we supposed to do? Keep taking it? No. So but this is where we are right now, and also a change. It's almost like someone who's been drunk on sugar-based, product. It's just you have to somehow help them to get rid of the habit, kick the habit,
Yeah.
and we're a long way from that, unfortunately. And so it's sometimes you have relapses, and this is what we see sometimes, seemingly emanating even from the United States under the MAGA movement era, I would say.